The world significantly changed last week, but it might not have changed in the way you think. Recently, OpenAI and ChatGPT were released as a free preview. Quite frankly, the results were stunning. In this video, we're going to look at what ChatGPT is and how you can use it to radically improve your life. We'll also look at why it's not the solution for everything, what dangers are involved, and how to safely take advantage of this technology. Before we get started, there are 3 things you need to know. First, if you want to improve your C# skills, you should subscribe to this channel. With over 450 C# videos and counting, this is the place to learn C#. Second, if you like free C# resources, go to www.iamtimcorey.com and click on the Resources tab. There you'll find my podcast, the C# projects page, and a lot more. Third, if you need a deep education in a C# topic, I have dozens of courses to help you out. Not only will you be able to get a world-class education, but you'll also be helping to fund my free content so that everyone can have a great education in C#, not just those who can afford it. All right, so let's jump right into ChatGPT, what it is and how it works. So first of all, I signed up for this free preview, and I did so by going to OpenAI.com and I signed up. Once I signed up, I logged in, then I went back to the browser and typed in chat.openai.com and I logged in there. This is what we're going to use today. This is, I think, the place to check this out. This is essentially, I'm going to super simplify this. This is a chatbot. That's what it is, because it remembers your previous interactions and uses those to shape future interactions. So let's talk about ChatGPT and OpenAI and what is this? Because a chatbot does not sound at all fun or even necessarily interesting. And I can tell you right now, this is going to blow your mind if you've not already seen it. This is a machine learning, actually AI platform that has learned from a vast data set on the web. And it has crunched all that information and turned it into a conclusions engine, essentially. So what that means is when you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. So let's ask it a question. And let's start simple. Let's start with the question, what is C#? That's all I'm going to ask it and hit enter. And depending on how backed up it is, it may be instantaneous or it may take a little bit. But this has just told me what C# is. Now, the way it does this is that it pulls from the storehouse of information it compiled based upon the model it was trained upon. Now, to be very clear here, this does not have access to the internet. Yes, we're talking to it through the internet, but it's not learning from the internet currently. It learned from its model and it has not been updated yet. Now, I think this week it's going to get updated with more information for its model, but this does not have the ability to go and get current information from the internet. That's probably a good thing. So we've got here a response. That's kind of cool, but I could go to Google and get something similar. So why is this so important? Well, let's give it something a little harder. In C#, create a random number generator method that takes in integers for bottom and top numbers. Okay. Now that's just a plain English phrase. I might put that in a code comment somewhere before I start writing a C# code, right? Or I can hit enter and let ChatGPT do its thing. Now again, depending on how backed up it is, it may take more or less time. But there is your method, and there is the explanation of the method, and it talks about how this method works. Now, this is where I'm glad it gave us this example, because there's a couple of key things you need to know about ChatGPT. So at this point, you're probably thinking, I don't need to be a programmer anymore. I just need to ask it the right questions and get the right answers. And that is absolutely not true. This does not replace developers, and there's a reason for it. So let's talk about this example specifically. This example gave us some C# code. And let's see if we can zoom in just a little bit here. I want to get as much as possible on the screen, but also want you to be able to read this. So this is the C# code that it gave. And it gave some decent code. We have public static int, make it static, so you can just call it without having to instantiate the class. It used bottom and top as the two parameter names because I said I want a bottom and top value. And so it just said, hey, you know what, you called it this, let's go ahead and name it that. And then it created the code to generate a random number. So it generated a new instance of random, and then it returns the next value with the parameters bottom and top being the limiting factors on that next method. So this all looks great. And if you put this in your code, it will work. In fact, there's even a copy code right here, which is awesome. You just copy that, paste it in your code, and all of a sudden your work is done, right? No, it's not. In fact, this is an example I found that I love because of the fact that it looks so convincing and yet so convincingly wrong. This is not the right answer. In fact, this is something that will lead you down the wrong path because it will work, but it will not work correctly. There's a couple of things that we need to talk about here. First of all, it instantiates a new instance of random inside of this method. Well, imagine for a minute that this method is being called by two different places in our code at the same time. Well, if it is, or close to the same time even, then this instantiation of random without a seed can create the same instance as in the same starting point for random, which means that these values could be in sync. Now, because this method and how small it is, that might not matter in your particular case, but it's something you should know about. The fact that your values could be the same in two different spots. That could be a problem. Well, that's not the only problem. So the other problem is in the documentation. The documentation looks great. In fact, it feels like this should be a blog post. Just paste this into a blog and you're good to go, right? No, do not do that. Stop. Don't start dreaming about having it, becoming this awesome blogger by just running ChatGPT. Because, again, this will work. It will appear to be right, and it will generate random numbers. However, it's the most insidious kind of bug possible in code, and that is a bug that does not just appear. It seems to work, but notice here where it says, and I saw it a couple times, but inclusive. Now, okay, so this is good. The last time I ran this, it said inclusive through 10. Now it says inclusive through 9, which is good. So it has changed, all right? So that was something that was in the last time I ran this. And that's an important thing too, is what I run will not be the same thing as what you get, even if you use the same exact words I do. So just know you'll get a different response when you run it. But this says 5 through 9 inclusive. That's great because the previous example that I got said the 5 through 10 inclusive, where it includes the top, and that is incorrect. That is not what it does. It does not include the top value. It's less than the top value. So it's up to, but not including that top value. It includes the bottom value, but not the top value. So it's exclusive upper bound. So that one is correct. Like I said, the previous time I ran this, it said inclusive of the top value. So we've got in here 2 bugs in our code. Well, 1 bug in the fact that this is a bug. It shouldn't be here. But then in the documentation of the previous example, the bug was that we expected something that wasn't going to be there. So that's important to note. And this is where I heard one person say it this way, and I think that's a great way of saying it, is that ChatGPT will be confident in its answer, including when it's confidently wrong. And how often it's wrong? We're going to call it 10%. Now, No, that's not a scientific number I've come up with in some way. I've not found anywhere where it says this is the percentage of time that's wrong. But it feels like about 10%. So we're going to call it 10%. Just to be fair to it, it may be higher than that. In fact, I would, from my examples, I would estimate it's higher than that. But we're going to call it 10%. Okay, so 10% of the time you'll get wrong information. However, it will not be like, oh, I think this might work. No, it's going to say this is how you do it, and it'll be wrong. All right, so be very careful of that. So, and this is what we're going to talk about today with this, is the fact that this is an extremely powerful tool. However, I'm going to give you the conclusion of this whole thing. Don't rely on the answers. Validate every response carefully. This is the same problem as what I have with Entity Framework. When people use Entity Framework, sometimes they say, well, because I use Entity Framework, I don't have to know SQL. And what it essentially says is, this is a black box, but it works, so we're good. The problem is, if you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, if you don't understand how it works, then when things don't go right, you don't know why. Well, the same thing is true here. When you're just relying on the code it creates, you don't know why it works, and then you put it in production, it makes your production a fragile black box. Because if things break, you don't know why. And you might be introducing bugs like this line right here in places that you didn't understand why it's a bug. And so now you're getting, values every once in a while, not all the time, but every once in a while you get values that are in sync, the same value. And you're like, that's not random. That's a repetitive set of numbers that are all the same. Well, that's because you used that line right there. So knowing how your code works is extremely important. So no, this cannot replace your education in C#. You can't just say, I don't have to know C#, I just have to know how to run this tool, because that's not wise. Have you ever gone on Stack Overflow and found an answer and you're like, okay, I'm going to paste this in my code, and it doesn't work? Well, this is the same thing. There's nuance to the world, and we have to learn that sometimes things will work, sometimes things won't, depending on your circumstances, or depending on your setup or what's around it. Or you might just get a bad answer, and that answer might be wrong because people are wrong. So let's talk about, real quick, before we get back to more examples, let's talk about where to get this information. Because, this feels a little bit like it's an artificial intelligence that's intelligent. Like it's actually, doing the work for me. This is like, Commander Data from Star Trek. This is like something that's actually responsive and maybe even sentient. No, it's not. Don't worry. Well, still worry. But what this is doing is it has scrubbed the web. It's taken the data set is from the web, and they've taken a whole bunch of people who have said, here's how you generate a random number in C#. And it has figured out how those pieces work, and it's figured out what the key components are. Which means that if it learns off of bad examples, it will give you a bad example. So there's some danger here, and that's why there's some danger here. The other thing is people say, oh, well, this is going to replace Google. No, I don't think it is. I think this should be a wake-up call to Google, because Google's not done a great job of search. And I think this would kind of proves it's not, because what this is doing is this is saying, hey, we found this is the authoritative answer you're looking for. And Google is supposed to give you the authoritative website with the answer you're looking for. And it's not always doing that. And part of it is they're trying to push all the ads first. So I don't think it's going to replace Google, but I think that maybe for now, searches should go here first before Google. That's just a thought. So the difference, though, is that this provides you the conclusion. Google provides you with the authority. There's a difference. And I think it's a key difference to know. All right. So let's talk more about examples. So first of all, reset thread up here. Upper left-hand corner, reset thread. If you click that, it's going to reset your chat. And what that does is it forgets all the interactions you've just had, because those interactions will affect future interactions. I want to show you how that works. So let's start with I'm going to actually copy and paste this because it's a little long. I'm going to paste this in. What it says is write a C# method to retrieve data from the SQL table person that has a first name, last name, and email columns. All right. So I've kind of specified what I want. I want a C# method to retrieve data from a SQL table. And I get the SQL table's name and the columns in it. I hit enter, and here is the code for talking to SQL to get that data. And quite frankly, this is pretty impressive. It even reads the table, the SQL table that comes back, or data table, and it reads through and it breaks it out into models, which is pretty cool. So this is using just ADO. So that's how it's doing it. And it looks to me at first glance, and I'm just reading this for the first time now, because again, this is different than the times that I've tested this. But this looks about right. This looks like it probably is decent. It's using a using statement here so that we can close out the connection properly. So I think this is right. But you know what? I don't prefer to use ADO directly because the fact this right here, this section right here is ugly. The toString and all these different parts. Yeah, but you have to, what if you have an integer in there? What if you have a date time? What if you have some other type? Well, you have some conversions to do that can get messy and expensive. And so instead of doing that, I like to use Dapper. So let's just tell it use Dapper. Now, that's all I'm going to say. I have not said anything else, but because it remembered the previous interactions we've had, when I say use Dapper, it's going to go, oh, you mean, let's try it again, because sometimes you have an error. Here's an example. And it uses that same example from before, but this time it uses Dapper for that connection. And it says, there you go. There is the structure for using Dapper. Instead, it uses query of type person, which returns a list of people. And notice it's doing a to list here. That's interesting. That looks almost like it's been reading my code, which is interesting because that's similar to what I would do with a to list and returning a list of person sometimes. So that's interesting. But the other thing that's interesting here is this code isn't perfect. For instance, why are you instantiating a new list of person? You don't need to do that. It just needs a list of person people. It can be null because then you're populating it right here. So that's not necessary. The other thing here is why are we doing an open connection? We don't need to open the connection here. This query will open the connection if it's not already open. So this is a line that's not needed. And I found that happens quite a bit in these suggestions. So there's some tweaks here. Like I said, this creates an instance we don't need, which means it's actually allocating more memory than we need to, because we don't need to have this allocation because we're overwriting it with this allocation, which pulls from our query. Now, I don't like the fact that we're using inline SQL. That's not cool. Let's instead use a stored procedure. Use a stored procedure. And wait for it to think. And so now it's going to create that same code again, but this time it's going to use a stored procedure, which is called getPeople. Now, interestingly enough, it didn't use Dapper. So we're back to that ADO, execute reader and use Dapper with a stored procedure. So sometimes it doesn't quite get it, and you have to kind of keep tweaking it a little bit. But the cool thing is it remembers your previous history and goes, oh, okay, this is what you mean. This is how I'm going to do it. And there you go. So now there is the getPeople method. Again, we're still instantiating that list, but this time we're using the getPeople store procedure. and we're using the command type store procedure, which is great. So that's interesting. It's written some code for us. It's tweaked the code for us. It's changed the code for us. That's some pretty cool stuff. All right. So I think that there's a lot of possibility here, but it's not just for writing code for you, and it will write code for you, but it's also for giving you information. How is ASP.NET different than ASP.NET Core? Now we'll see if this answers the same way as it answered previously, because I want to talk about that previous answer either way. But you can ask it questions like this, and it will give you long form answers that are an opinion, and answers that, again, are extremely confident. All right. So this is interesting. It's slightly different than what I got before, but it says they're both frameworks for building web applications. True. There's some key differences. That's true. One of the main differences is that ASP.NET is a mature framework that's been around for many years, where ASP.NET is newer cross-platform, released in 2016. That's mainly true, yes. So that means that ASP.NET has a wider range of features and larger ecosystem of library and tools. That's not true. All right. Wider range of features? I don't think so. Yes, it has a large ecosystem of libraries and tools, but a lot of those tools have come over to ASP.NET Core, and ASP.NET was only for web forms and MVC and API. With ASP.NET Core, we have Razor Pages, API, MVC, Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, and we continue to add more and more features to those things. So, key difference, ASP.NET was built on the full .NET framework, which is a proprietary framework developed by Microsoft. ASP.NET Core is built on an open source .NET Core runtime, this is true, which can be used on multiple platforms, including Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So, yes, that is true. So this means that ASP.NET Core applications can be deployed to a wider range of environments, but they may have some limitations compared to ASP.NET applications. That's not true. There's nothing that you can do on, okay, I'm going to preface this a little bit. Yes, you can't do web forms on ASP.NET Core. You can do Razor Pages, which is a pretty similar thing, or Blazor Server, which also can be very, very similar. And you can do WCF on ASP.NET, and you can't, well, there's a preview beta version of ASP.NET Core, WCF Core on ASP.NET Core. But no, limitations compared to ASP.NET, no, that's not true. The choice between ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core depends on specific requirements of your project. If you need a mature first of all, I agree with this. Yes, the specific needs of your project are important. So if you're working in a legacy system where they have thousands of pages in MVC and you're going to create another page, what should you use? Well, MVC. Because even though MVC, the .NET Core version of MVC is out, probably mixing that in your environment won't be that great. So you can use the legacy, or you can use web forms if you're already doing web forms. However, I do encourage people to move if they can. But this is saying it depends on requirements of your product. True, but it says if you need a mature and feature-rich framework that is tightly integrated with the Microsoft ecosystem, then ASP.NET might be a good choice. That's false. If you need a mature and feature-rich framework that's tightly integrated with the Microsoft ecosystem, use ASP.NET Core. If you need a mature and feature-rich framework that's not tightly integrated with the Microsoft ecosystem, use ASP.NET Core. If you're starting any new project in the web and you don't have any things holding you back, any existing projects that you have to integrate tightly with, use ASP.NET Core. They're not really, it's making a judgment based upon information that doesn't really understand. Okay. So this information right here is confident. It looks right. It looks clear. It's wrong. So Be very careful whenever you use this tool that you don't start making opinions and don't start making decisions based upon what this confidently told you. And this is where, again, I come back to what's the difference between ChatGPT and Google. With ChatGPT, it gives you a conclusion. This is a conclusion. With Google, it gives you the authority, meaning it gives you a web page and says, here, this is the page that is most likely to have the right answer you need. And it ranks them and it gives you a list and it says, here are a million answers, the first, 10 per page, unfortunately with a lot of ads around them, but there's your answers. You decide which authority to trust. And you can go through and see 3 and 4 and 5 and 10 and 20 different takes on this topic in order to determine what is really true. For example, you should probably go to Microsoft and see what they say about ASP.NET versus ASP.NET Core, because that's not going to be their answer. This is not their answer. So knowing what the conclusion is can be helpful in certain circumstances, but don't decide that this is a replacement for all of your Google needs, because these are conclusions and they are not always right. Now, I don't want to sound down this technology. This technology blows my mind. I've already given it to all of my team and told them, use this. Every team meeting we have, we're going to use this whenever we have to discover new information or to get more information on a topic. Now, we're going to be very careful because we know that it's not always right. But we know that we can use this as a tool, not as a replacement for our brains. And this is where be very careful. Don't use this to replace your brain. Use this to help you. Use this to help supplement what you're doing. But don't just take this, the code that it gives you, don't just copy and paste this in your code and say, cool, I'm done. This is not what you should do. Take the code, validate that it works, validate that it's a wise choice, understand every line of the code, and then use it. I've already used this to fix some of my code. I have some code that I wrote really quick and dirty. I created a console application that processed my video files. So I have a standing station where I create video files. And I want to stay there and record. But when I'm done recording, I want to do something with that file before I move on to the next one. And so I create a little application that it renames the file, it extracts the wave audio file from the video file, and it moves it into the right location. But I had a little bug in there where it wasn't choosing the last video recorded in certain circumstances. It was basing it off the file name, but when a file naming rolled over past midnight, it caused a problem. And I'm like, I just know that the bug is there. I'll fix it one of these days. I had ChatGPT fix it in about 5 seconds. And the fix is right. And so just boom, done. There you go. I don't have to think about it anymore. But I knew what the answer was. I validated and verified the answer and made sure that it did what I expected it to do in the way I expected it to do it. So this is a great tool. Just don't rely on the answers without validating them first. Remember, this is a conclusion based upon what a machine thinks might be based upon all the stuff that's read on the internet. And as you know, all the stuff on the internet is not right. There's some stuff in there that might not be correct. There's some stuff in there that's absolutely not correct. And there's some stuff in there that is just blatantly wrong, outdated, or just biased in a certain way. I'm wondering if this paragraph right here is biased based upon people who think they know what Microsoft's all about and say things about that and blog about it, but don't actually know what it's all about. So I wonder if that has influenced this answer, because this answer is wildly incorrect. So be very careful. So Take your time, make sure you validate the answers, but I would highly encourage you to start using this to just try things out, to learn C# better. Just make sure that this is not your teacher. And this is not, I'm not saying this because I'm a teacher and I want to be the teacher for you. I'm saying this because this will lead you down the wrong path. Things like this, they're incorrect. And so just saying, oh, that's how I do things. But if you need it to help you maybe look at things a different way, that can be helpful. You can even paste small snippets of code in here and say, what does this do? And have it explain it to you. And then validate that's actually true. But that way it can help you understand things better, maybe help you figure things out. So with that, I'm going to leave you here. I'm not going to, belabor the point, but I want to show off OpenAI and ChatGPT and just show you that this thing is pretty impressive. I have spent hours in this already, just figuring out, trying it out, trying different things. Plenty of cool stuff in here that you can try out, and there's really cool stuff you can do. But just be careful of its use. All right. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.